Hi, you're watching New York State Legislative Report with Senator Tom O'Mara. I'm Julia Locanty. Today, the Senator and I are going to talk about reining in state spending and making it a more affordable place to live in New York. Great to be with you, Senator.
Thanks for having me back on, Julia.
Right. Recently the Cuomo administration audits found an appalling number of waste and duplication in state government, really squandering taxpayer money.
It comes down to appropriate management of government, and it appears that Governor Cuomo is having his people take a look at the nuts and bolts of purchasing simple things that is wasting taxpayers' dollars, and we're not getting the bang for our buck with important programs that are out there that are being cut because of wasteful spending. Pointing out that different agencies are paying between $9 and $3 for a dozen of pens. I got on Staples.com, and you can get a dozen pens on Staples.com for $1.29. Why is state agencies paying 3 times that or 8 times that is absurd. Certainly with the quantities that are purchased, should be able to get a better price than what I can get by getting 1 dozen pens on Staples.com. So it's those types of wasteful things, disparities in vendor contracts within the same agency, where one vendor is getting paid 2.5 times the rate that another vendor is getting paid for doing the same services. Those things just don't make sense, and I think that the governor is going through and trying to root these things out. I've spoken out a lot on government waste, particularly in our biggest program of Medicaid, but I think it's in all levels of government. We need to look at the waste, make sure that there's management in place. I think a lot of time in these bureaucracies, if it's not your money, you're not as concerned about how you're spending it. Exactly. And we need to make sure we have the appropriate disciplined management in place to control this and make sure that the taxpayers' dollars are being used as efficiently as we can. Right.
It's like, who would spend their money that way? This is totally inefficient. Yeah. You brought up some good examples. There's some others. 425 toll-free numbers that haven't been used in months.
Yeah.
And,
for like $1 million worth of 800 numbers that aren't being used.
Right.
So why aren't they disconnected?
1 million square foot office space in New York City, and it's completely vacant. Yeah. And then additional office space bought after that, as recently as December. Just squandering taxpayer money. It really makes me sick as a New York taxpayer.
Well, it certainly outrages me, and we need to be diligent on this. I will, work with Governor Cuomo on issues like this, side by side to root these things out. And I've certainly been a leader in the area of Medicaid reform, which is an issue that's very acute to all of us, particularly in Southern Tier, where we've paid a lot of attention to it, and that's been a major driver of our property taxes across New York State, and particularly in the Southern Tier, where we've had counties that 100% of their entire real property tax levy goes to pay for Medicaid. And that's an unfunded mandate that we need to get to work on relieving the burden of these unfunded mandates. We have Governor Cuomo out going across the state on his legislative priorities, which one of them being a tax cap, which I support. But I don't think a tax cap is feasible unless we do the mandate relief for counties and school districts to be able to provide these services that are mandated, that they're not being reimbursed for, because that just goes to the real property tax levy. So the governor had been talking a lot about unfunded mandate relief, and it's been pretty quiet lately. I was hoping we'd get into more of that after the budget process got done. I understand his mandate relief team is going to meet again next week and come out with hopefully some better findings, because their first report was pathetic, frankly. It had no solutions to the mandate relief problems, and these are serious, real issues that are going to be confronted to counties and school districts if there's a 2% tax cap put in, which I support, because our property taxes are out of control. But we got to make sure that it's done in a manner that's feasible for our local governments to be able to meet that demand.
Right. Let's talk about what you're planning on doing with you want to offer initiatives for people to go into volunteer emergency services. Tell us how that will help taxpayers.
Well, our volunteer services are critical, and especially in rural communities that the volunteer fire department is the lifeblood of the community. It's the community center. It's an activity generator within the community and provides vital services that if we had to pay for these services through the taxpayers, through the property tax, I mean, you think we have a property tax problem now. It would be outrageous if we had to pay for these services without volunteers. So I've developed a package with some of my colleagues, and we work every year to try to improve incentives to get volunteers in. You know, there was just a big push statewide by the local volunteer corps to build up the idea of volunteering and giving back to your community. But these are very important entities that provide just fantastic services to our communities, whether it's fire response, accident response, or responses to national disasters and emergency services that people rely on, particularly in our rural communities. That we need to make sure we have incentives there that will encourage our younger people to get involved. You know, as you know, one of the problems we see in a lot of areas in our society today with dual working parents, with children, with more and more activities, the sporting activities, the extracurricular activities that they're involved in, takes up a lot of your time as a young family doing that, and less time to be able to be involved and active in a volunteer capacity. And yet over the years, the requirements for participating as a volunteer firefighter or EMT have gotten more and more onerous every year. And we should have important training that trains these people to do it properly and do it safely for themselves so they're not getting injured. But some of these regulations and requirements are overbearing, and I think some people just throw up their hands and say, you know, I'd love to volunteer and do these things, but I don't have the time to put in for all these things, you know, annual recertifications and things like that I really don't think are ultimately necessary and do deter people from being involved. We see some communities in my district that the volunteer corps are vibrant and active and recruiting young people and getting them involved in an early age and having them interested in, you know, giving back to the community, and that's a lot of people want to be able to do that. There's other communities that haven't been as effective or haven't had the ability to drum up the support, and they've seen dwindling volunteer numbers, which makes the emergency responses that much more difficult.
Right, so what you want to do is offer things like tax credits and the ability to be able to afford college for these.
Yeah, so some tuition assistance in exchange for giving back and being a community volunteer, breaks on property taxes, breaks on vehicle registration fees. If you're a volunteer firefighter using your vehicle to respond to fires and other emergencies, then a break on your registration fees. It's something that's, you know, it's not a huge amount, but it's something to provide some incentive. Somebody to say, hey, you know, at least I'm getting something back for what I'm doing in a responsible way, because, you know, funds are limited, so we can't really afford to break the bank too much. But I think by giving some tax credits, tax breaks, exemptions on certain amounts of property tax in exchange for the services, because otherwise, if the communities have to pay for this, it's going to be a huge burden on all real property taxpayers.
All right. Seems like a win-win for everyone, really.
Well, it should be. You know, it's great getting people involved in. As I said, the rural volunteer fire departments are the backbone of those communities, and it's important to keep them alive and active.
Yeah, we had a $10 million deficit, and the budget closed that. But when we talk about rooting out the fraud and waste, you have been trying to assist in that same effort through encouraging the use of technology to help pinpoint fraud in the Medicaid system. Yes,
there's very effective tools out there for data mining in the Medicaid database with millions and millions of transactions on an annual basis. It's very hard to compile and really track it manually, but there are these services out there, and one that I promote a lot because it's a local company called Salient that provides data mining software that our New York State Medicaid Inspector General now is utilizing to root out fraud and define fraud and waste in the system. But I want to provide incentives and dollars to counties that are really on the front lines of administering Medicaid. They're working in the trenches day in and day out. Provide some dollars for them to be able to acquire this kind of software, because it's not cheap, so that they actually have it. And I've seen it in action, and it's amazing how quickly you can find out where a certain provider is an exception to a group, and say, why is that? Why is this one spending so much more in treatments than others are for the same type of disease classification? Utilizers of it, the recipients, some are outliers, and this is a very effective and fast way to find these things out and find out whether there's a reason for that makes sense, or whether there's waste. Because I think the waste in the Medicaid system is a bigger dollar issue in the end than the fraud is. And the fraud is very important that we're very firm on that, and we're getting better in the Medicaid Inspector General's office in that regard. But the waste and utilization on that is a big issue of a $53 billion a year program. You know, if we can save, I think, 10% in waste, I don't think with any trouble whatsoever. Again, as I started out at the beginning, management in government, which is often lacking, the management, the responsibility, because, you know, it's not like you're running a business to make a profit, and a lot of people get, I think, lackadaisical about spending taxpayers' dollars because it's been seemingly a bottomless pit. Just tax more and so the state can spend more. But we need real responsible management at all levels of government to make sure that the programs are running as efficiently and effectively as we can.
In 2009, the state budget eliminated the eligibility requirements with face-to-face interviews and finger imaging. These interviews were intended to ensure accountability. So what do you think happened when that took place?
Well, there's been a great effort in the state from the liberal leadership we had over the past 4 years to expand those people, to expand the ranks of recipients of Medicaid, of other entitlement programs, without real qualifications being put in place. Not even having a face-to-face interview to really determine someone's financial eligibility to whether they are eligible for these programs and should be receiving these services, because we want to be able to provide these important services such as Medicaid, health care, to those that really need it and cannot afford it. That's a very important program we have in our society, and we need to continue that. But if we just continue to have a wide open field of any, it's just ripe for abuse and waste, and the checks were virtually eliminated by Governor Patterson and his administration, to where the local DSS, Department of Social Services, and their you know, reviews of new applicants don't require a face-to-face meeting. They don't require a financial investigation to determine what information is put on the application is accurate or not. So I think we're seeing swelling rolls of the recipients, some of which really are not eligible for those programs.
All right, we only have a minute left, but I want to talk about, you co-sponsor some legislation that would require potential public assistance recipients to pass a drug test. Tell us how that would help.
Well, you know, it's very basic, I think. You got many people I know, friends, many constituents that go to work every day and have drug test requirements for their jobs to do. These entitlement recipients, it's not a job, so to speak, but they're obtaining benefits and should have to have those same kind of standards. We don't want those benefits being wasted on somebody going out, purchasing drugs, and utilizing them. That should be a basic, simple standard that if you're out, if you got the money to go out and spend on illegal drugs and use them, then why should the taxpayers be providing these other services for you at their expense? It should be just a basic responsibility, and maybe if you get the people to stop utilizing the drugs, then maybe they'll be more productive and not need the assistance.
All right, good. Thank you. Thanks so much for being with us, Senator.
Thank you.
For any additional information, you can log on to the Senator's website, omara.nysenate.gov.